Ever feel like, I don't know, like you're constantly surrounded by images and like even like relationships and work, it's all filtered through some kind of screen.
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of the world that Guy Debord was describing way back in 1967 in his book, The Society of the Spectacle.
Right, right.
And as a philosopher, you're going to find his ideas super relevant even today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Debord's work is, it really gets into the nuts and bolts of how modern society works, especially his concept of the spectacle.
Exactly, the spectacle. So in this deep dive, we're going to, unpack that whole concept, explore how people reacted to it, and kind of trace Debord's own path as a thinker.
Sounds good.
And we'll also look at the Situationists, that radical group that he was a part of, and how their ideas influenced later movements.
Absolutely, yeah. And since you're a philosopher, we'll make sure to highlight the theoretical side of all this.
Perfect. Okay, let's start with the Society of the Spectacle. Debord makes this really powerful argument that modern life is just dominated by images and representations. And he even has this famous line, everything that was directly lived has receded into a representation.
That line is really the heart of his critique. Debord is arguing that we don't experience reality directly anymore. It's all through this filter of images and signs and commodities.
Oh, I see. So it's almost like we're living in this world of reflections.
Exactly.
Constantly being bombarded by these mediated experiences.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's not just about media, right? It's got to be deeper than that.
Exactly. It goes way deeper. The spectacle isn't just TV or advertising. It's like the whole system of social relations that's mediated by these representations.
Wow.
It shapes how we understand ourselves, our desires, even our connections with other people.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is.
And Debord also makes this really interesting point. He says that the spectacle isn't just some like neutral outcome of technology. He actually sees it as a deliberate construction.
That's right. Yeah. He argues that the spectacle serves those in power. It's a way to keep things the way they are, to keep the masses pacified and distracted and entertained.
I see. So how does it actually do that?
Well, it creates this false sense of unity and consensus. It masks the real divisions and inequalities within society.
So it's like a smokescreen almost.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, so we've got this pretty I don't know, kind of bleak picture of the spectacle dominating everything.
Yeah.
But Debord wasn't just a pessimist. He also believed in the possibility of resistance.
Absolutely. And that's where the Situationists International comes in. This group of, radical artists and writers and intellectuals who were deeply influenced by Debord's ideas.
Right.
They wanted to disrupt the spectacle, to kind of shake people out of this passive acceptance of this mediated reality.
So they were like activists in a way.
You say that, yeah.
And they came up with some really creative ways to do that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like détournement and psychogeography.
Exactly. Détournement was all about subverting those dominant messages of, images and symbols.
Yeah.
It's like taking a familiar ad or logo and twisting it, creating a new, more critical meaning.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's kind of like cultural hacking.
Exactly, yeah. Taking something from pop culture and turning it on its head.
I like that. And then there's psychogeography, which is all about like exploring the city, the urban environment in these new and unexpected ways.
Right. The Situationists wanted to disrupt our routines, to break free from those prescribed paths and discover these hidden meanings and possibilities of the city.
So it's about like seeing the city with fresh eyes. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. They even had this vision for like redesigning cities. They call it unitary urbanism, right?
Yes, unitary urbanism. That was their idea for a city that would, encourage creativity and play and genuine social interaction.
So like a more human-centered city.
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to create spaces that would help people connect with each other and with their environment in a more meaningful way.
That's a really interesting vision. So who are some of the key players in this Situationist movement, besides Debord, of course?
Well, there was Roel van Ezem, who wrote The Revolution of Everyday Life, which is a really influential text. It explores the possibilities of, resistance in the everyday.
Right.
And then there's Asger Jorn, a Danish painter and sculptor who was one of the founding members of the Situationist International.
Okay, so these ideas didn't just stay within this, like, small group, did they?
No, not at all. Situationist ideas had a a real impact on the May 1968 uprisings in France. Their slogans and their critiques of consumer society, they resonated with, students and workers who were challenging the status quo. And you can still see their influence today in a lot of, activist and artistic movements.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've got Debord's critique of the spectacle and the Situationist efforts to disrupt it. But Debord didn't stop with just the society of the spectacle. He went on to write comments on the society of the spectacle in 1988.
Right, right.
So what's he getting at in that later work?
Well, in comments, Debord argues that, the spectacle has become even more widespread and entrenched, since he first wrote about it. He talks about the rise of what he calls the integrated spectacle, which is basically the fusion of the spectacle with the state, with those institutions of power.
So it's like the spectacle's gotten even harder to recognize and even harder to resist.
Exactly, yeah, because it's so deeply embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And that's pretty scary.
It is.
Debord saw this as a really dangerous development.
Yeah. He argued that, the spectacle is no longer just about controlling our behavior. It's about controlling our very thoughts and desires.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so the spectacle has evolved. It's become even more integrated into our lives.
Yeah.
What about the Situationists' legacy? How did their ideas continue to resonate?
Well, one group that was really influenced by both Debord and the Situationists was Tiqqun.
Okay.
This radical collective that emerged in France, I think in the late 1990s. They took Debord's critique of the spectacle in some really interesting and challenging directions.
And they came up with their own set of concepts, right?
They did.
Like Bloom and the Imaginary Party.
Exactly. Bloom is their term for the atomized, isolated individual living within the spectacle. They describe Bloom as someone who's completely disconnected from, their own desires and their own capacity for critical thought.
So like just going through the motions.
Exactly. They're basically just, consuming and being consumed by the spectacle.
And then there's the Imaginary Party, which is a much more, I don't know, abstract and elusive concept.
Right. The Imaginary Party isn't like a traditional political party. It's more like this diffuse network of individuals and actions that resist the spectacle's domination.
Yeah.
So it's this force of negation that, operates within the spectacle, constantly undermining its logic and creating these cracks in its facade.
So it's almost like a phantom resistance movement working to disrupt the spectacle from the inside.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Tiqqun believed that the Imaginary Party was already at work, manifesting in these seemingly random acts of rebellion and sabotage and creative disruption.
Wow. It sounds like they were really trying to push Debord's ideas even further to find new ways of understanding and resisting the spectacle in a world that was becoming increasingly complex and mediated.
Absolutely. They saw the spectacle's influence in every aspect of our lives,
Right.
from our relationships to, our political beliefs. And they were committed to finding ways to challenge its grip on our minds and on the world.
That's pretty amazing. Okay, so we've talked about Debord's critique of the spectacle, the Situationists, their influence on Tiqqun, and the evolving nature of the spectacle itself. But Debord's own life was also pretty interesting and ultimately tragic.
Yeah, Debord's life was a reflection of his ideas, really.
Wow.
He was a bohemian, an intellectual, a provocateur. He lived his philosophy, rejecting those values of mainstream society and embracing a life of experimentation and critique.
But he also struggled with things like alcoholism and depression, right?
He did, yeah. And tragically, he took his own life in 1994.
His suicide has been the subject of a lot of speculation and debate.
Yeah.
Some people see it as a reflection of his disillusionment with the world, his despair at the seeming triumph of the spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
Others see it as more of a personal tragedy, a result of his own internal struggles.
It's a complex issue, and it's impossible to know for sure what motivated his decision. But his death does raise, some questions about the personal cost of a life dedicated to critique, about the challenges of living in a world that seems increasingly hostile to those values of authenticity and freedom.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant and insightful critics are still human beings,
Right.
subject to the same vulnerabilities and struggles as everyone else.
Yeah.
Now, to really understand Debord's work, I think it's helpful to delve into the Society of the Spectacle chapter by chapter.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's a dense book, but it's structured in a way that lets you unpack his ideas, systematically.
Okay, so chapter 1 is titled Separation Perfected.
Yeah.
What's Debord getting at here?
Well, in this chapter, Debord is laying the groundwork for his critique of the spectacle. He argues that the spectacle is it's a product of the separation that's inherent in modern capitalist society.
Okay.
We're separated from our labor, from each other, and from the products of our labor. And the spectacle steps into this void, filling it with images and representations that further alienate us from ourselves and from the world around us.
So it's like the spectacle thrives on our separation, on our disconnectedness.
Exactly. Yeah, it offers us this false sense of connection through, images and commodities, but at the same time it reinforces the very structures of separation that underpin our alienation.
So it's kind of sneaky like that.
It is. It is.
Okay, chapter 2 is the commodity as spectacle. I think we can guess where this is going.
Yeah, probably. Here, Debord zeroes in on the central role of the commodity in the spectacle. He argues that the commodity has become more than just a product to be bought and sold. It's become a spectacle in itself, a source of fascination and desire that drives the whole system.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about meeting our basic needs anymore. It's about creating this constant desire for more, for the newest, the shiniest, the most exclusive.
Exactly, yeah. And the spectacle is constantly bombarding us with images of these commodities, fueling our desires and creating this sense of lack and inadequacy.
I see.
We're constantly being told that we need more, that we're not complete without the latest gadget or fashion trend.
It's very persuasive.
It is. It is.
Okay, chapter 3 is unity and division within appearance. This one sounds a bit more abstract.
Yeah, this chapter gets into the contradictory nature of the spectacle.
Okay.
Debord argues that, the spectacle presents itself as this unified, harmonious whole, but it's actually built on division and conflict.
Oh, interesting.
It masks the real divisions within society, the inequalities of power and wealth, by creating this illusion of shared values and experiences.
So it's like the spectacle is papering over the cracks in society, creating this facade of unity while the underlying problems just keep festering.
Exactly. And that's one of the spectacle's most insidious qualities. It makes it difficult to see the real sources of our dissatisfaction and to imagine, alternatives to the existing order.
It's like a distraction technique.
It is. It is.
Okay, chapter 4 is titled The Proletariat as Subject and Representation. Here's where Debord's Marxist influences really, really come to the forefront.
Right. Yeah. In this chapter, Debord explores the relationship between the spectacle and the proletariat, the working class. He argues that, the spectacle has co-opted the image of the proletariat, using it to sell products and to maintain the status quo.
So it's like the spectacle is taking the revolutionary potential of the working class and just neutralizing it.
Yeah.
Turning it into just another image to be consumed.
Exactly, yeah. Debord argues that, the spectacle has stripped the proletariat of its agency. I see, turning it into a passive audience rather than an active agent of change.
Right.
It's a form of ideological control that prevents the working class from recognizing its own power and challenging the system that exploits it.
Okay, let's move on to chapter 5, Time and History.
Mm-hmm.
What's Debord's take on these big concepts?
This chapter gets into some pretty heady territory. Debord argues that the spectacle distorts our understanding of both time and history. It traps us in this eternal present, a constant flow of images and information that disconnects us from both the past and the future.
So it's like we're constantly bombarded with the now, with no sense of historical continuity or future possibility.
Exactly, yeah. And Debord saw this distorted sense of time as a key way that the spectacle keeps us passive and controlled.
Right.
It prevents us from understanding those larger forces that shape our lives and from imagining alternatives to the present.
It's like being stuck in a bubble.
Kinda, yeah.
And what about history? How does the spectacle distort our understanding of that?
Well, Debord argues that the spectacle rewrites history to serve its own purposes.
Right.
It presents this sanitized, fragmented version of the past that reinforces the the dominant ideology.
I see.
It erases the struggles and sacrifices that led to the present, making the current social order seem inevitable and natural.
So it's like history becomes a tool of propaganda,
Yeah,
a way to justify the existing power structures and to prevent us from imagining, alternatives.
exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the spectacle's most powerful mechanisms of control.
Right.
By controlling our understanding of history, it controls our understanding of the present and limits our ability to envision the future.
Okay, chapter 6 is everyday life.
Right.
What's Debord's focus here?
In this chapter, Debord looks at how the spectacle permeates every aspect of our lives, from our work to our leisure, even to our most intimate relationships. He argues that the spectacle colonizes our everyday experiences, turning them into opportunities for consumption and spectacle.
So it's like even our most personal and private moments aren't immune to the influence of the spectacle.
Right.
It's everywhere, shaping how we think, how we feel, and how we interact with the world around us.
Exactly. Yeah. Debord argues that the spectacle creates this kind of pseudo-life, a life lived through images and representations rather than through direct experience.
So like a fake life, basically.
Right. Yeah. We become spectators of our own lives, passively consuming the spectacle rather than actively creating our own experiences.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
Okay, let's move on to chapter 7, which is titled The Spectacle of Culture.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is where Debord gets into how the spectacle affects, art and literature and ideas.
Yeah, you got it. This chapter is especially relevant for you, as a philosopher. Debord argues that the spectacle co-opts and commodifies culture, turning it into another form of entertainment rather than a source of, critical thinking and challenge.
So it's like culture becomes just another product to be bought and sold.
Right.
Another way to distract us from the realities of our world.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. Debord sees the spectacle as promoting this cultural amnesia where we're constantly bombarded with, new trends and ideas, but prevented from developing a deeper understanding of history and culture.
It's like we're always chasing the next shiny thing.
Yeah, that's it.
And never really stopping to think about the bigger picture.
Right.
He also critiques the way the spectacle create like a hierarchy of cultural value, elevating certain forms of art and literature while marginalizing others.
Absolutely, yeah. He sees the spectacle promoting this kind of cultural elitism that reinforces, the existing power structures.
Right.
It dictates what's, considered highbrow and lowbrow, creating this system of cultural exclusion that serves to maintain the status quo.
So for Debord, true culture should be something that challenges the status quo, something that, provokes critical thinking and sparks our imaginations, not just another form of passive consumption.
Exactly, yeah. He believed that, art and literature and ideas, they should be tools for questioning the world around us, not just another way to escape from it.
Okay, let's move on to chapter 8, the organization of territory.
Yeah.
What's Debord's focus here?
In this chapter, Debord explores how the spectacle shapes the physical environment, how it transforms the landscape and the city to, serve its own needs.
So it's not just that the spectacle dominates our minds. It also reshapes the physical world to fit its logic.
Exactly. Yeah. Debord points to, the rise of sprawling suburbs, the proliferation of shopping malls, and the increasing dominance of cars as examples of how the spectacle transforms the landscape.
Wow.
He sees these developments as reflecting the spectacle's need to create spaces that are conducive to consumption and control.
Right.
Yeah.
He also critiques the way that the spectacle fragments and isolates communities, creating a sense of placelessness and alienation.
That's right. He saw the modern city in particular as a place where the spectacle's influence is most intensely felt. He described the city as a space of surveillance and control where our movements and interactions are increasingly monitored and regulated.
So it's not just that the city is full of, distractions and advertising, but its very design is meant to control us.
Yeah, that's a key part of Debord's argument. He saw the modern city as a reflection of the spectacle's logic of separation, control, and commodification.
This is making me want to move to a remote cabin in the woods.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
But even there, the spectacle might find you in the form of, internet access and targeted advertising.
You're probably right. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Okay, chapter 9, negation and consumption in the cultural sphere. What's Debord getting at here?
Well, this chapter really dives into like how the spectacle takes over creativity, especially in culture. Debord's argument is that the spectacle turns culture, art, music, literature, into just another thing you just passively consume. It strips it of its power to critique or challenge, the status quo.
So it's not just like distractions. It's also taking those things that we use to understand the world and question the world and turning those into part of the spectacle too.
Yeah, exactly. He was really worried about the spectacle creating this kind of cultural desert where real creativity and critical thinking just, couldn't exist.
So he's not just talking about like, lowbrow entertainment. He's talking about the whole like intellectual and cultural landscape.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's talking about how, the things we use to make sense of the world, to make meaning, those are being co-opted too.
And he also critiques the way the spectacle promotes, like celebrity and spectacle, where style and image often overshadow substance.
Yeah, right. He saw that obsession with celebrity as another distraction, a way to keep us entertained and keep us from, focusing on the real problems.
So it's like the spectacle wants us to be like obsessed with the Kardashians instead of thinking about, climate change or economic inequality.
Yeah, pretty much. He's saying, don't get caught up in all the flash and the hype. Think about what's really going on.
Right. So it's like the spectacle wants to use culture to lull us into this state of complacency.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. Debord believed that real culture, true culture, should be a force for questioning and challenging things, not for, reinforcing how things already are.
Okay, moving on to chapter 10, The Time of the Spectacle.
Yeah.
This one, Debord really gets into how the spectacle, warps our experience of time.
Yeah, this is a really interesting chapter philosophically. Debord's argument is that the spectacle, it traps us in this artificial sense of an eternal present. We're just constantly bombarded with images and information, and it creates this sense of immediacy and urgency, but it actually disconnects us from, the past and the future.
It's like we're living in this perpetual now.
Exactly.
With no real connection to history or any clear vision of what might lie ahead.
Right. And Debord saw this distorted sense of time as a key way that the spectacle, keeps us passive and controlled.
So it's like it's preventing us from understanding how we got here and also from imagining how things could be different.
Exactly. Yeah. It cuts us off from our own history, from the struggles of, those who came before us. And it also makes it harder to imagine, alternative futures.
Right. It's like we're just kind of, floating along in this stream of images and information without any sense of direction or purpose.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And he also talks about how the spectacle manipulates our understanding of history itself, presenting this sanitized kind of fragmented version of the past.
Right. He saw the spectacle as, rewriting history to serve its own agenda, erasing the struggles, the sacrifices that shaped the world we live in, and making the current social order seem, inevitable, like it's the only way things. Absolutely. He believed that, understanding how the spectacle distorts our perception of time and history was essential for developing critical consciousness, for envisioning a future beyond the spectacle's control.
Okay, we're getting near the end of the Society of the Spectacle. Chapter 11 is the historical prospect for revolution.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds like where Debord lays out his vision for change.
Yeah, this is both an inspiring and challenging chapter. Debord acknowledges how, powerful the spectacle is, but he also really believes it's not invincible. He sees the potential for revolutionary change in those growing contradictions, in crises of capitalist society, and in that increasing sense of dissatisfaction and alienation that the spectacle itself creates.
So he's not saying it's hopeless.
Not at all, no.
He's saying, look, there are cracks in the system and there's potential for something new to emerge.
Yeah. Yeah, he's saying, the spectacle is creating its own undoing. By creating so much alienation and dissatisfaction, it's also creating the conditions for people to rise up and say, enough.
But his vision of revolution isn't just about, seizing political power.
Right, no, it's much more radical than that. Debord believed that real revolution requires a fundamental transformation of, everyday life, a complete shift in how we live, how we work, how we relate to each other.
So it's not just about changing who's in charge. It's about changing the whole way we live.
Right, exactly. He saw the need to create situations, moments of disruption and rupture that challenge the spectacle's grip on our lives.
So it's not about waiting for, some big political upheaval. It's about actively seeking out, ways to resist and create alternatives here now.
Yeah. That was Debord's message. He saw the potential for revolutionary change in those everyday acts of, defiance and creativity and solidarity.
So it's about, small acts of rebellion, building a new world, one step at a time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's really inspiring, actually.
Yeah, I think so, too.
So it's a vision that's both hopeful and demanding, a vision that requires us to be active participants in the creation of a better world.
Absolutely. Debord's work is both a sharp critique of the world as it is and a call to action to create the world as it could be.
Now, in addition to the Society of the Spectacle,
Yeah.
Debord also wrote comments on the Society of the Spectacle in 1988.
Right.
So what's he addressing in that later work?
Well, it's a really fascinating look at how Debord saw the spectacle evolving. He argues that it's become even more pervasive, more integrated into our lives. It's no longer just this separate realm of images, but a force that's seeped into every aspect of our existence.
So it's become even harder to escape, even harder to see clearly.
Exactly. And he talks about, the rise of what he calls the integrated spectacle, where the spectacle and the state, those institutions of power become almost indistinguishable.
It's like they've merged into one.
Yeah, pretty much. They work together to, maintain control, shaping not just our behavior, but also our thoughts, our desires.
It's getting pretty deep in there.
It is.
And he also talks about the role of, technology in all this, right?
Right.
Especially television and computers.
Yeah, he was really prescient in his observations about technology. Debord saw how these new tools could be used to spread the spectacle's messages, to control information. He was really critical of television in particular. He saw it as promoting this kind of passivity and superficial engagement with the world.
It's funny. His concerns about media saturation and information overload feel incredibly relevant today. Even more so than when he was writing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was really aware of how technology could be used to distract us, to manipulate us, to prevent us from, really thinking critically about the world around us.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with Debord and his own writings. To really get a full picture, I think we need to talk about the Situationist International, the group he was a part of. They were pretty radical, weren't they?
The Situationists were a fascinating group, that's for sure. They were artists, writers, intellectuals who were deeply, critical of modern society and really committed to finding ways to, disrupt the spectacle and to create more meaningful, more authentic ways of living.
Okay, so can you tell us a bit more about some of their key ideas and practices,
Right.
like détournement and psychogeography? We touched on them earlier, but I think it would be helpful to go a little deeper.
Sure. Détournement, as we said, is about subverting those existing cultural elements, right? It's about taking, images, symbols, texts even, and twisting their meanings to create something new and critical.
Right. Yeah.
And the Situationists were masters of this, using it to challenge the messages of the spectacle and to inject these moments of, critical reflection into everyday life.
So it's about reclaiming meaning
Yeah, yeah.
turning the spectacle's own tools against itself.
Exactly, exactly. And then psychogeography, which, that was about exploring the city, the urban environment, in a way that disrupts those usual patterns of movement and perception.
Right.
The Situationists were really fascinated by the ways that cities shape our thoughts and our behaviors.
Mhm.
And they believed that by, experiencing the city in new and unexpected ways, we could break free from those conditioned patterns and open ourselves up to new possibilities.
So it's about, seeing the city with fresh eyes, discovering the hidden meanings and possibilities that are often, overlooked.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. The Situationists were all about challenging the ways that we experience the world, and they saw the city as this, particularly fertile ground for experimentation and disruption.
So it's not just about like wander around aimlessly.
Yeah.
It's about like, actively engaging with the city, trying to see it in a new light.
Yeah, yeah.
And their work, continues to inspire artists and activists and urban explorers today.
It does, it does.
The Situationists were also active in the May 1968 uprisings in France, weren't they?
Yes, they played a significant role in those events. Their ideas about the spectacle, their critique of, consumer society and their calls for, radical social change, they really resonated with, the students and workers who were rising up against the establishment.
And their slogans and posters were everywhere during the protest.
They were.
Their slogan, "Under the paving stones, the beach." It's such a powerful image of the potential for radical transformation.
It really is. It captures that situationist idea that, even beneath the seemingly solid surface of everyday life, there are possibilities for something different, something, more free, more joyful.
Hmm.
And their ideas and actions during that time continue to inspire people around the world who are fighting for, social justice, for a more equitable world.
Now, Debord's work and the Situationist movement, they've had a lasting impact,
They have.
influencing a lot of later thinkers and activists.
Right.
One group that comes to mind is Tiqqun, which we touched on earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit more about how Tiqqun built on Debord's and the Situationist ideas?
Sure. Tiqqun was deeply influenced by both Debord and the Situationists, but they also developed, their own unique and often very challenging interpretations of those ideas. They took Debord's critique of the spectacle and really pushed it further, applying it to new areas of social life, exploring new forms of resistance.
So they weren't just, copying Debord. They were taking his ideas and running with them.
Exactly. Yeah, they were building on them, adapting them to their own time and context.
And they came up with, their own set of concepts, right? Like Bloom in the Imaginary Party.
Right, Bloom, that's their term for, the atomized, isolated individual who lives within the spectacle.
Mm.
Someone who is disconnected from their own desires and their capacity for critical thought.
So Bloom is like a product of the spectacle.
Yeah, yeah. Shaped by its logic and unable to really see beyond its illusions.
And then there's the Imaginary Party, which is, a much more elusive concept.
Right. The Imaginary Party isn't a traditional, political party with leaders and a platform and all that. It's more like a force of negation, a network of individuals and actions that resist the spectacle's domination. And Tiqqun saw the Imaginary Party as already at work, manifesting in these various acts of rebellion and sabotage and creative disruption.
So it's almost like this secret society of resistance fighters.
Yeah, kind of. But, they didn't have a formal structure or leadership or anything like that. It was more about a shared spirit of resistance, a willingness to challenge the spectacle's control in whatever ways, they could.
So it's more like a mindset than an actual organization.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And his ideas have also influenced contemporary discussions about technology and its role in social control.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Debord's critique of the spectacle, it really foreshadowed a lot of the concerns that people have today about, surveillance capitalism, the manipulation of social media, and the ways that technology can be used to undermine, democracy and individual freedom.
It's like he saw it coming.
He did. He did. He was really ahead of his time in a lot of ways, and his work has given us, this language to talk about these issues and a framework for thinking about how to resist them.
And it reminds us that the struggle for a more just and equitable world, it's not just about changing laws or institutions. It's also about changing the way we think, the way we live, and the way we relate to each other.
Right, right.
Now, throughout this deep dive, we've seen how Debord's personal life was really intertwined with his ideas. He was a complex and often controversial figure.
He was.
And his life, ended tragically.
Yeah, Debord's life was it was marked by both brilliance and struggle. He was this fiercely independent thinker, a cultural critic, a political activist, but he also, struggled with alcoholism, with depression.
Yeah.
And in 1994 he took his own life.
And his suicide has been a subject of a lot of speculation and debate.
Right.
Some see it as a reflection of his disillusionment with the world. A sign of despair at the seemingly overwhelming power of the spectacle. Others see it as a more personal tragedy, the result of his own internal struggles.
It's hard to say for sure, what motivated his decision, but his death does, raise questions about the personal cost of living a life, dedicated to critique and resistance.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant and insightful critics are still human beings, subject to the same vulnerabilities and challenges as everyone else, and it also, I think, highlights the importance of finding ways to sustain ourselves, to find joy and connection, even in the midst of struggle.
Okay, so moving on from Time of the Spectacle, Chapter 12 is called The Urban Spectacle. What's Debord's take on cities and urban spaces, in the context of the spectacle?
This chapter is really interesting because it connects the spectacle to how our physical environments are designed and experienced. Debord argues that the spectacle doesn't just dominate our minds, it also shapes the actual landscape we live in, especially in cities. So it's not just about billboards and advertisements. It's about how the layout of the city, the types of buildings, the way spaces are used, all of that reflects the logic of the spectacle.
Exactly, yeah. Debord was really critical of urban development that prioritized consumerism, social control, and the atomization of individuals.
Yeah.
Think about sprawling suburbs, the decline of public spaces, and the increasing privatization of what used to be shared areas. These all contribute to the spectacle's dominance.
And he also talked about how the spectacle encourages this very superficial experience of the city. Right? It's like we're just tourists consuming these prepackaged experiences rather than actually living in and engaging with our surroundings.
Right. He used the term touristic to describe that, that phenomenon where people are encouraged to see cities as just collections of sites to be consumed rather than places to be lived in, to be experienced authentically.
So for Debord, reclaiming the city from the spectacle, that would mean creating these new forms of urbanism that prioritize community, genuine social connection, and a more meaningful relationship with our surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely. He envisioned cities that foster creativity, play, a sense of belonging, a far cry from those sterile consumerist landscapes that the spectacle often produces.
Now, consumerism itself was a major target of Debord's critique. He saw it as a key engine driving the spectacle.
Mm-hmm. For Debord, consumerism wasn't just about buying more stuff. He saw it as a system that creates these artificial needs and desires that keeps us trapped in this cycle of wanting and never really being satisfied.
And this constant cycle of desire and dissatisfaction is, of course, very beneficial to those who profit from our endless consumption.
Right. The spectacle is constantly bombarding us with these messages that tell us, we need more, that we're not enough as we are. It fuels this culture of envy and comparison, driving us to acquire things we don't need, just to feel this sense of completeness or belonging that we that we never quite achieve.
And Debord also talked about the idea of commodity fetishism,
Yeah.
where we give objects this kind of magical power and meaning that goes beyond their actual function.
Right. We forget that these objects are the products of, human labor and social relations. And we start to see them as having like this inherent value in and of themselves. We fetishize them, imbuing them with qualities that they don't actually possess.
And this fetishism, it serves the spectacle perfectly, because it keeps us focused on acquiring things rather than questioning the systems and the structures that produce those things.
Absolutely. It's a way to distract us from the real sources of our alienation and to maintain the status quo.
So for Debord, resisting the spectacle means resisting the pull of consumerism. It's about finding ways to live, more simply and authentically and to value things like community and connection and experiences over material possessions.
Exactly. Yeah. He saw consumerism as a kind of trap, a way of keeping us preoccupied with, superficial desires while the real problems of the world continue to worsen.
Now, despite his often kind of bleak assessment of modern society, Debord wasn't entirely pessimistic. He did believe in the possibility of something better, of a world beyond the spectacle.
That's right. While Debord was this, fierce critic of the spectacle, he wasn't without hope.
Yeah.
He believed that another world was possible, a world where, human creativity and freedom and authenticity could flourish.
So what did this world beyond the spectacle look like to Debord?
Well, he envisioned a society that prioritizes genuine human connection, direct experience, and the fulfillment of our creative potential.
Yeah.
It would be a world where people are no longer just passive consumers of spectacle, but active participants in shaping their own lives, and communities.
Did he offer any concrete ideas about how to get there?
Debord wasn't big on providing these detailed blueprints for social change. He believed that the path to a better world wouldn't be found in following a predetermined plan. It would be found in the spontaneous and creative actions of individuals and groups who are willing to challenge the spectacle's hold on our lives.
So it's about like taking action,
Yeah.
creating situations, building alternatives, wherever and whenever we can.
Exactly. He believed that change had to come from below, from people coming together to create these new forms of social organization, new ways of relating to each other, and new ways of experiencing the world. Yeah. He saw the seeds of this transformation and the everyday acts of resistance and creativity that were already happening, all around him.
Well, this has been a truly illuminating deep dive into the world of Guy Debord and the spectacle. It's certainly been a challenging journey, but I think it's left us with some incredibly valuable insights into the forces that shape our lives and the possibilities for creating a more just and equitable and meaningful world.
I agree. Debord's work, while dense and complex, offers this really powerful critique of modern society that remains remarkably relevant today.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought from Debord to ponder. He wrote, "The spectacle is not a collection of images, but a social relation among people, mediated by images." What does this mean for our understanding of the spectacle's power? And how can we, as individuals and as a society, begin to challenge and transform this relation? That's something for you to contemplate as you continue to explore these ideas.